Okay, so we are standing outside of the Tavern bar. This can be seen right here. This building has been here since the 1800s. It was originally a private residence, and then it was bought in 1916 by a German immigrant to be turned into a German-style brew house. You can tell by the architecture on the front here, definitely influenced by those Western European designs. However, it was 1916, so by the time all of the renovations and stuff had been done, Prohibition had rolled around, and obviously this could not open as a brew house as intended. So, what they did is they opened Enfield General Store on the bottom floor of the building, and then the top floor was a brothel as well as a speakeasy. The hill that is behind the tavern is a neighborhood in Austin known as Judges Hill, which is still today one of the most affluent neighborhoods here in town, also one of the oldest neighborhoods, and especially in the 1920s, that's where a lot of the bigwigs and movers and shakers in town lived. So naturally they trickled down the hill and made up the clientele of the brothel upstairs. One of these men was named Walter. At least that's what he went by when he visited the tavern. He's also referred to as the red-headed statesman, and he's a red-headed guy with a big old mustache. Walter is one of the ghosts that we'll be talking about inside. We will also be talking about Emily as well as Maria. So Maria was one of the women who worked in the brothel upstairs, and Emily was her young daughter who lived at the tavern with her. Although Emily is about 11 or 12 at the time, and there's no indication she participated in any brothel work, thankfully. One last thing to point out before we head inside, this is one of the few historic buildings that we'll be visiting this evening. And you can see it's marked by the curb marker over there. It says Enfield Store, which is, you know, what the city records officially show as being here. And then once Prohibition ended in 1933, the building started serving beer, and it has been some form of a bar or tavern ever since. Also, this was the first building in town to get air conditioning in 1926, so we can go on inside and enjoy that amenity if there's no questions. We'll go inside and go upstairs. There's a bar area up there as well if y'all want to order drinks. So we just were walking around on the second floor of the tavern, and as I mentioned outside, that is where the brothel as well as the speakeasy was located. The bar for the speakeasy was right behind this wall, so in that room that they're showing the movie tonight. And then the brothel was located along this wall that y'all all just walked past to come out here. The brothel consisted of 4 canvas stalls all lined up. Read that as hanging sheets to separate the rooms. The room closest to us, so in this left corner over here, was where Maria spent most of her time. And that was known to be the prime spot in the brothel. The way that this ceiling is angled makes the room a little bigger than the other stalls. Also, since she was on the corner, she had one solid wall and then only one canvas wall. But I would say the most important part was that it's the first stall that a John would see as he came up those stairs that we just came up ourselves. So you would get the most business if you were the woman that got to be in that stall. And most often that was Maria. There is a foosball table there now, and that's because before, when there was a normal dining table in that corner, people would complain that it was extremely cold in that corner, and they would request that the AC be turned down or turned off completely. And there's really no vent specifically blowing in that corner. In fact, it's right by this door that leads outside, and so it's actually a little warmer than the rest of the bar. But patrons would often get really frustrated with how cold it was and even move halfway through service. And obviously this was quite frustrating for the staff, so they took out the wait table and added a foosball table and haven't had any complaints since. So when Maria was there, it was really common that she would be visited by Walter, who I also mentioned outside. Walter, the red-headed statesman that lived over on yonder Judge's Hill, over time he became quite infatuated with Maria. Throughout their visits, he fell in love with her. At least those are his words. And so Walter was so in love with Maria that he decided to make her an offer. He said that he would buy her a house and he would provide for her for all of her means. She would never have to work another day or see another man, so long as she tended to Walter's needs whenever he came around. And this sounded like a pretty appealing offer to Maria, and she accepted on the condition that she could bring along her daughter Emily. And to that, Walter said, if I wanted a wife and a child, I'd just go home to my own. So he got very angry at this refusal of his offer, and he was storming out of the brothel when he caught sight of Maria's daughter Emily darting into her room. Walter grabbed Emily, pulled her up to the 3rd floor of the tavern, where he proceeded to smother her and then leave her bodies underneath the floorboards of a crawl space. Maria met a very similar fate at the hands of Walter not long after, and because of that, both of their spirits still reside here in the tavern. Now, for a while, we were wondering why Walter would be here, because being the jolly red-headed statesman, he didn't really pay for any of his crimes. He snuffed out Maria and Emily, the two people that would be looking for each other, and I'm sure he had a few strings he could be pulling with some of his neighbors up on Judge's Hill. So nothing really came of these crimes, and Walter went on to live a long and happy life. So we were wondering why his spirit was still here at the tavern. A podcast called the Night Owl Podcast does paranormal investigations around town, and they did a series here at the tavern where they brought a clairvoyant who also is named Sarah, and she was able to get some information out of the spirits that are here. And it was through that investigation we learned that Walter is actually trapped here by Maria. So it seems that once he died, she was able to pull his spirit here and trap him in the tavern so he could at least start paying for what he did to her and her daughter in his death. So all 3 of the spirits are active here. Emily is definitely the most prevalent spirit, and being a young girl, she's rather playful. She's kind of known as a prankster. She likes to mess with the staff, specifically the females. And she's actually often seen around the 2nd floor area here. So if any of y'all are a little more sensitive to the paranormal, you might notice that there is a 12-year-old girl walking around the tavern here. If you see her, let the group know so we can see if anyone else sees her. If we don't, probably Emily. In addition to messing with women a little more, Emily's also known to pick on redheads, seeing as, you know, the man who killed her was a redhead. And so I was here actually at a Wicked Wednesday movie night with my current roommate, who happens to be a natural-born redhead. And we were leaving the bathroom. We passed the wait station, which is actually where Emily's room is believed to be. And my roommate asked why there was a little kid sitting behind the wait station. You know, she said she was sitting on a stool and picking her feet. And I looked over there, clearly didn't see any little girl. And neither of us had had enough to drink to be seeing things like that. So I let her know that that's probably Emily, and we decided to call our Uber and take it home for the night. Emily also is known to mess with the TVs. So this is typically a sports bar when they're not showing some old films such as Alien, which is tonight's feature. They're usually playing some sort of sports ball game on the TVs. The channels are known to change themselves, and oftentimes when they do, they will change to Cartoon Network or Disney Channel, something a little more fitting for a 12-year-old girl to be watching. Also, the tavern has a total of 48 TVs, including both stories and then the indoor and outdoor sections. And so as you can imagine, for a closing manager, their last duty is usually to turn off all the TVs. Now, the tavern has 2 remotes, and with those, they're able to control all the TVs so they can really easily power down at the end of the night. And one day, the manager goes to find the remotes, and they are not in the one spot where they live. He can't find the remotes, and so he has to go around and turn the TVs off one by one. So he does all of the TVs upstairs. He goes downstairs and is just finishing up turning off the last TVs down there when he hears the TVs up here making their little boodoo, boodoo sound. And one by one, all the TVs start turning on to cartoon channels. People who work here obviously know about the stories and know that it's haunted, so he kind of shrugged it off, came upstairs, turned them all off again, and then the TVs downstairs started doing the exact same thing and turning back on. So he threw his hands up in defeat and said, okay, watch whatever you want to watch, just clean up after yourself when you're done. He locked up and went home. When he came back the next morning, he was very apologetic to the opening manager, saying, you know, the TVs weren't turning off and then the remotes were missing, and so I'm sorry, you know, I did the best I could. And the manager looked at him and said, what are you talking about? All of the TVs were off this morning and the 2 remotes are exactly where they always are. And ever since then, it's been pretty common that the TVs just don't seem to want to stay off as the manager is closing down. And it's gotten to the point where if the TVs turn back on, they just leave them on because they're always turned off in the morning. Another one of our tour guides, Julie, hosts these Wicked Wednesday trivia nights. So anyone who lives here in town, they're every other Wednesday, and they'll show older horror movies and stuff, and then it's followed by trivia. And the first Wicked Wednesday I attended was, of course, Children of the Corn. And we were having a lot of trouble getting it started. Julie was trying to play the video on Hulu, and she kept getting logged out or kicked off her account, and the movie would start and then stop. It just wasn't working. So I was up there, I was trying to help her. We logged into my account, got kicked off, same deal. And then I was walking back to my seat, and I turned to her and I said, it's probably just Emily messing with it. And she was like, of course it's just Emily. And then as soon as we had both said Emily's name, Children of the Corn started playing right away. So Wicked Wednesday has switched to using VHS tapes, partially for nostalgia, but it also does get rid of a lot of those electrical interference opportunities. However, being VHS tapes, at the end of the night, while Julie is up on the stage doing trivia, the video will be rewinding behind her. And it just so happens that every night there's 1 or 2 questions where she asks the question right as the scene is being rewound behind her. And anytime that happens, the movie will stop rewinding and play, thus revealing the answer to Julie's question. So Emily likes to help out the crowd, but even with her help, I have never been able to win trivia. So Maria is also spotted occasionally on the 2nd floor area here. Sometimes people will catch a glimpse of what they think is Emily from the back, but over time we've actually learned that this is most likely Maria. Maria was in her mid to late 20s at the time she died. She was very young when she had Emily, making them very similar in size as well as appearance. And so a lot of the times if people see Emily, they might in fact be seeing Maria. Walter oftentimes likes to haunt the staircase leading up to the attic and then hang out in the attic area up there. We can go up there next. It is a little bit toasty in there. The AC doesn't go all the way up, and so we'll go up there. I have a few stories I like to tell specifically up there, and then if we're getting too warm, just communicate with me and we can come down and finish up the rest down here. So y'all can bring your drinks, and we will head upstairs. So the attic area here, careful, you're stepping on a wire. Yeah. Didn't want you to trip. So the attic area where we are here, this is where Emily's body was found, specifically in the crawl space behind me. We want to open it up and take a look. Should have a flashlight. Occasionally people will get the glimpse of something in here. People also will report that it smells very bad when I open it. Some people have compared it to the stench of death. And then others get very emotional when I open this. A few people have began to cry as soon as I opened it with no real reason, and then as soon as I close it, they're fine. I do.
Is your flashlight in here somewhere?
Oh, I moved it to this pocket so it would be easier for me to find.
And we all have phones too.
Okay.
Yeah, I poured a little in there.
Oh, here it is. Okay. Just kind of your run-of-mill crawl space these days. And then on the staircase behind me, that's where Walter is often seen. He is usually viewed as a very dark figure who's also very large. He appears more like a shadow figure than an apparition. And I don't know why, but for some reason when I first started giving tours, I was under the impression that Walter didn't like to come up the stairs. I had it in my mind that he kind of stuck to the landing down there. But we did have a few psychics who came on our tour in June, and they both let us know that Walter liked to follow the tours up here, and he stands in this corner back here and laughs at the tour guides as we tell our stories. So just an all-around great guy. I mentioned a lot of activity kind of is centered around this staircase. We did attribute that to Walter at first, knowing that he liked to hang out down there, but we have since learned that for the most part it is Emily, because like I mentioned, she's kind of a prankster. She likes to scare the staff as well as the patrons. And so a lot of times people will have their hair pulled or their shirt flipped up as they're walking up these stairs. Some people report feeling somebody following behind them, and then they'll turn around and no one will be there. But probably most frequently, people hear somebody running up these stairs quite often. And the office for the staff here is located behind y'all in that door area. And so there is some poor manager that has to come and do the closing books every night, very late and alone up in the attic here. So it is very frequent that they'll hear somebody running up the stairs, and they will turn and then see that nobody's actually come up. It's happened on my tours several times where my group and I are standing up here and we hear the distinct sound of somebody running up these creaky old stairs, and then we'll stop and turn and nobody ends up coming. I had one tour where I was up here giving my little spiel, and I thought I saw one of the bartenders for the tavern coming upstairs to check on us, which they do fairly frequently. So I turned to let them know that it was just me and we're up here, we'll be out of their hair soon. But when I turned around, instead of seeing a man dressed in all black, like the bartenders usually are, I caught the glimpse of a little white dress just whipping around the banister there. I didn't really say anything. I kind of continued on with my story, and two of my guests interrupted me at that time to let me know that they thought they heard something coming up the stairs. It was also that same night that one of the other tour guides saw what they assumed was me coming up the stairs. She said she was up here with her group and she thought I was coming up after her, so she turned to let me know to hold back, and as she turned, I vanished. I was also on the first tour that night, so I was already gone from the tavern at that time. We're not sure if that was like an anniversary or something, but it did seem like Emily was quite active that night. And I haven't seen her since, and again, I'm fine with that. So in the office behind y'all over there, there is the security feed for the whole bar. There's a screen that has a bunch of little feeds showing all of the different areas of the bar. And one of the cameras used to be pointing into the office itself. But one night, there was a manager up there. She was doing the closing books, and she looked up to see herself sitting at the desk, and then a very large black figure standing in the doorway behind her. I would have quit, just ran out, but she was a lot braver than I, and so she turned around, didn't see anybody behind her. She looked back at the screen, that figure was still there, and when she turned around again, nothing was back behind her, and when she went to look at the screen again, it had turned black. And that was about 7 years ago at this point. The tavern has never been able to have the screen turn back on. They completely gutted the system and rebooted it about a year ago when they went under new ownership. And when they turned it on, again, that one feed just would not work. So we guess Walter doesn't like having his picture taken, which is interesting because I actually have a picture here. So I mentioned that the Night Owl podcast did a little investigation here, and they saw, when they were up here, the clairvoyant Sarah was standing right around here, and her husband was standing kind of right where you are. So he took a picture with this viewpoint, and if you see, I'll pass it around. If you look on the staircase, there's something a little out of place there. I have it zoomed in on the next one. So that's zoomed in. This is the big picture. You can see the crawl space right there.
Is that what we're looking at?
Yeah.
Right there? Yeah.
It's zoomed in. It's just this big, old, dark figure with a face in front of it.
Face is what's that?
Yeah. When Sarah saw this picture, she said that the black mask back there is Walter, but that the face is actually Maria, and she was there to kind of hold Walter back, which seems to be what Maria spends a lot of her time doing. Another time, one of the managers had their family in town, and so her mom, as well as her young daughter, came to work here to, just visit, say hello. The manager was with her mother in the office, talking about boring adult things, and the young daughter, who was about 5 or 6, was hanging out in the attic area here. So when the two women came out, they found that the daughter was standing right in front of the crawl space here, having a full-blown conversation with thin air. They asked who she was talking to, and she said, "The weird girl with no shoes." So they asked her to draw this weird girl with no shoes, and I actually have that drawing for y'all over here. Now keep in mind, this is a 6-year-old's rendition, so it's not necessarily the most artistic, but this is who she said that she was talking to. So this speech bubble says, "You're hired." Apparently Emily liked the girl. She said that she could work here, so they could get to know each other better, spend a little more time together. If you notice, this frame is broken. That's because when this painting or drawing used to be hanging up, it would regularly fall down as if somebody was knocking it down. We think Emily probably doesn't like this. It's not the most flattering portrait of her, I would imagine. But now we have it leaning up on this shelf, and it doesn't fall nearly as often, although it still does get knocked down occasionally. I had a tour a couple months ago with 3 youngish kids. I think they were 9, 10, and 12. So right around Emily's age. And at that time, the light over here happened to be burnt out, so it was super dark and scary in that corner. And the kids were having a great time running in and out and trying to get pictures and doing all this stuff. And then one by one, they both kind of ran out of that corner, and all of them said they felt something touch their necks. And this is right by where the crawl space is, where Emily was murdered. People also often will feel cold spots up here, and occasionally have their hair pulled kind of more where y'all are standing. It seems like whatever's up here likes to hang out right over there, as well as in the corner over here. The last thing I like to cover is the bathrooms. So I mentioned that we have some haunted bathrooms. The downstairs bathroom at the tavern here is said to be the more haunted one. It has 2 stalls in it, and one day one of the bartenders was going down to just, use the facilities, and she found that both of the stalls had been closed and locked, but there was nobody inside of them. So her mind doesn't immediately go to ghosts. She more thinks, drunk people think it's funny to do that and crawl under. And so she's bending down to crawl under the stall herself. And as she does so, both of the doors unlock and slam open right in her face. So she had to take a little breather, do a walk, and then finished her shift. Again, much braver than I am. There has been this wailing that people report hearing in the bathroom downstairs which seems to have migrated to the upstairs bathroom as well. A couple of our guides have heard this wailing, and I actually have a video. Hopefully it's quiet enough up here that we can hear. But this is the wailing people report to hear. One of our guides, Crow, recorded this for us a few weeks ago. If you listen close.
Oh yeah.
So it sounds kind of like a whimper or something. And I believe that was in the bathroom on the second floor up here. Also, in the second story bathroom that some of y'all just used, the light will often kind of start pulsing, and people's phones are known to act a little wacky. I've been in there washing my hands with my phone sitting on the counter, and I'll watch the volume be turned up and down as if somebody's pressing on it. I also recently learned that people get really weird phone calls when they're here at the tavern. So they get phone calls from an unknown number, and then if they answer, it's usually a sort of like crackling or shrieking, and then it'll hang up. And one of our tour guides got this mystery call about a month or two ago, and she didn't answer. She was on a tour, but it left her a voicemail. Now the voicemail itself was enough to give anyone chills. It was just a lot of weird sounds that I'd imagine are probably demon-y, but I'm not going to try to reenact them. But what really weirded me out about this voicemail is it was originally about 8 seconds long or so, and it kept getting shorter and shorter, and then eventually it just deleted off of her phone entirely. I don't know about y'all, but I've never had a voicemail do that to me. I think that's all the stories that I have for y'all here. If there aren't any questions, we can head down whenever we're ready. If y'all want to take any pictures up here too, sometimes creepy things will pop up. I'm also here as a photographer or for any, questions, comments, concerns.
He's got video going.
Yeah, I'll wait to look at it later.
Yeah.
For sure. And the sound too.
Yeah.
I have one thing to point out to y'all downstairs on the way out. So if we're ready, we can head down.
Yeah.
Okay, so everyone got a look at the shoes. So these are labeled as Emily's shoes, obviously. They fell from the ceiling when the tavern was doing some construction in 2003. Where exactly from the ceiling did they fall? Right where that red flag is hanging, kind of in front of the restroom sign. So if we all apply our fantastic spatial reasoning skills about where the crawl space was. The bar did have them dated, and the timeline adds up. They are from the 1920s or so. Although the clairvoyant from Night Owl did say that they're actually Maria's shoes, which makes sense. They seem a little large for a 12-year-old girl. And so we assume that they were a hand-me-down, because we do know Maria was a working lady. She probably couldn't afford to buy Emily a new pair of shoes every time she grew out of hers. I also regularly wear my mom's shoes, and I wear a child size too, so shoe size doesn't really matter, regardless of age. Oh, my mom is little. I am bigger than her.
Wow.
I have been since I was like 12.
I was gonna say that was when I was like young. If I make it, my mom's little too.
Yeah.
So like if I make it over 5 foot, I'm like scarred.
Yeah, that was all I needed. My mom came home from the doctor like a year ago and was like, I grew. I was like, don't grow at your age.
My mom's shrinking.
I know, it's like you're getting smaller. But yeah, so everyone grab another look at the shoes on our way out, and then we'll head downstairs. And I have one story to tell y'all outside, nothing to do with the tavern. Does everybody see these lights hanging out on the hill up there? So there's a big tower with 3 or 4 lights on them. That is the top of one of Austin's moon towers. Has anyone heard of the moon towers before? Do y'all know why they're here in town? Yeah. So in 1884 and 1885, Austin was home to one of the nation's first reported serial killers. He got the name the Austin Servant Girl Annihilator, as he did take the lives of 7 servant girls and a couple others in his less than 1 year of activity. Now, at that time in the 1880s, Austin had a few murders here and there, being a Wild West town, but nothing like a string of serial axe murders. So obviously the atmosphere on the streets was frightened, to say the least. And also at that time, we didn't have all of this lovely light pollution we do these days. And so if it was a rather dark and cloudy night, as it is tonight, and the moon was covered, then the city would be cloaked in pretty much complete darkness. The city did not want to purchase traditional street lights like the smaller ones you see. Because of all the hills in Austin, it wasn't exactly lucrative for them to purchase that many lights. So Austin bought these 33 moon towers secondhand from the city of Detroit. They ended up being installed around town in 1895, so about a full decade after the killings had ceased. However, Austin to this day is the only city that still uses our moon towers. We have 17 that are still fully operational, and 6 of them are in their original location from 1895. They are part of the National Registrar of Historic Monuments as of the 1970s, and they were widely popularized by the 1991 film Dazed and Confused. Party at the Moon Tower. Party at the Moon Tower. Also, since we actually do have some locals tonight, if y'all have ever been to the Trail of Lights, a moon tower does make up the trunk of the Christmas tree in the park. And if y'all have any more questions or comments about the Austin Servant Girl Annihilator, I do happen to be the co-host of a podcast called Hellbound, and we do have an episode on the Austin Servant Girl Annihilator. I'm also here now to answer questions, but I like to do a shameless plug.
What was the purpose of killing the servant girls? Was it, raping?
Yes, they were sexually motivated. He would often use the axe or like a blunt object to debilitate them inside, and then he would drag the women outside to a backyard or an alley, and then usually stick like an iron rod or some kind of rod into their ear to demobilize them, and then he would proceed to rape them and slash them up with an axe.
What was the name of your podcast again?
Hellbound?
Hellbound.
Hellbound. Like things that are going to hell. Like the Austin Servant Girl Annihilator. And also, like all of us.
Like Hellraiser.
Yeah, Hellbound. I send a follow-up text tomorrow that has like discount code for our merch store, and then I also send a link to Hellbound as well as the Night Owl podcast.
Nice.
So y'all will have all that information as well. So no ghosts in that story, just murder. But if y'all want, this is a nice photo op for the van, especially with the moon back there. And then after we're done taking pictures, we can pile in and get to our next stop of the evening.